Hello there and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into a highly specific, absolutely critical area of pharmaceutical manufacturing. We're looking squarely at Module 3 of the EU GMP Annex 1 program, focusing all our attention on personnel, gowning, and aseptic behavior. If you work in sterile processing, you already know the stakes are incredibly high. So today we're going to dissect the single largest contamination variable in sterile manufacturing, us, the human being. We'll look at exactly why we're such a massive risk and precisely how we use physical and behavioral shields to protect the product.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. The human contamination risk. 2. Gowning by cleanroom grade. 3. Proving gowning competence. 4. Aseptic behavior and first air. And finally, 5. Managing process interventions. Let's get straight into it.
Section 1. The human contamination risk. To kick things off, let's start with a fundamental knowledge check for anyone in aseptic processing. In an aseptic filling operation, what is the single largest source of contamination? Is it the HVAC system, the raw materials, maybe the equipment itself? Take a brief second to lock in your answer.
It's personnel. People. We're the definitive problem that we're trying to solve in a cleanroom setting. No matter how advanced the facility design is, or how incredibly robust your sterilization cycles are, the very moment a human operator steps into that room, the risk profile absolutely skyrockets.
The mechanics of this human threat are pretty undeniable. As humans, we are continuously shedding skin cells and microorganisms, literally constantly. And this happens even when we're fully gowned. On top of that, just our physical movement disturbs the highly controlled airflow in the room, which can potentially transport that contamination directly into the critical zone. Because of this biological reality, our primary contamination control strategy isn't just about making better gowns. It's actually about designing processes to minimize human presence entirely. That means strictly controlling operator numbers and ensuring access is fiercely restricted. Only qualified, healthy staff with a genuine operational need should be in there. Fewer people, moving less. That's the baseline we have to start from.
Section 2. Gowning by cleanroom grade.
Now, since we can't completely remove personnel from all processes just yet, we need a physical shield. And that shield has to scale directly with the level of risk. So physical protection scales up with the grade. Let's look at grade D. Here, you need appropriate protective garments, and your hair, beard, and personal clothing must be covered. Step it up to grade C, and now arms must be covered with gathered wrists and a high neck. But reaching those critical zones, grade A and its surrounding grade B background, well, that requires a sterilized, non-shedding full gown with absolutely zero skin exposed. We're talking the whole shebang: hood, mask, goggles, sterile gloves, and boots. And crucially, transitioning into these higher grades relies heavily on strictly designed changing room flows and step-over benches. This physically separates the different stages of gowning to prevent cross-contamination before the operator even sets foot in the room. This physical shield and the pathway to actually put it on has to be absolute.
Section 3. Proving gowning competence.
Having the most advanced, sterile, grade A gown in the world is frankly completely useless unless the operator has definitively proven they can put it on without contaminating it. And that brings us to a foundational concept: gowning qualification. This is defined as the documented demonstration that an operator can gown correctly and aseptically, which is verified periodically. I really want to emphasize the word documented here. This is a strict, evidenced competency. It is definitely not just some simple one-off induction tick box where you watch a quick video and sign a form. It's a rigorously tested skill.
The chronological life cycle of that qualification is incredibly strict. Step 1. Operators absolutely must complete an initial gowning qualification before they are ever allowed to work unsupervised in a grade A or B area. This involves both visual assessment and some rigorous microbial sampling like glove and gown contact plates. Step 2. Only when they've passed that can they work unsupervised. Step 3. This competence isn't permanent, so operators must undergo periodic requalification. And finally, Step 4, which is absolutely vital for compliance. If there are any adverse monitoring results or a gowning failure, that operator is immediately excluded, no exceptions. They must be completely retrained and requalified before they're allowed anywhere near the critical zone again.
Section 4. Aseptic behavior and first air.
Now we build from that static, physical protection to the dynamic, behavioral shield that's required once the operator is actually on the cleanroom floor. Aseptic behavior requires deliberate, slow, controlled movements that avoid disrupting the unidirectional airflow over exposed product. Notice the phrasing there. Deliberate and slow are the core markers of a highly trained operator. Every single motion must have a purpose. Rapid or jerky movements, they create turbulence. And in a grade A environment, turbulence is the enemy of sterility.
This leads us perfectly to our second knowledge check, and it's perhaps the most fundamental aerodynamic concept in all of aseptic processing. What exactly is first air, and why is it so absolutely critical to product safety? First air is defined as the air first passing over a sterile surface or product from a unidirectional source. And the golden rule of aseptic processing is right there at the end of the definition. It must not be interrupted. Think about it. If an operator reaches their arm across or over an exposed product or an open vial, the clean air hits their arm first. And despite the sterile gown, that arm is a potential contamination source. The air hits the arm before it hits the product. So reaching over the product interrupts first air and introduces an immediate, severe contamination risk. A trained operator must always orient themselves to ensure first air is protected.
Section 5. Managing Process Interventions. We've established how operators should behave, but what happens when the realities of manufacturing force them to physically interact with the critical zone? Well, an intervention is any activity where an operator interacts with the critical zone. These are classified into two types. You have inherent interventions, which are the routine, expected steps required to run the process, like setting up a filling line. Then you have corrective interventions. These are the unplanned actions needed to fix a problem, like clearing a jammed vial. Both carry an immense amount of risk.
Managing these interventions is governed by strict rules. First and foremost, interventions must be kept to an absolute minimum. In fact, equipment and lines should be engineered and designed specifically to reduce the need for an operator to intervene at all. But when interventions are unavoidable, every single routine and corrective action must be rigidly predefined, trained for, and formally represented in aseptic process simulations, which you'll often hear called media fills. And what if an unplanned intervention or breach occurs? Well, it must be reported immediately so the quality team can assess the potential impact on the product. There is zero room for improvisation in Grade A.
We've reached the end of our explainer, and I want to leave you with this powerful compliance takeaway. Protect first air above all. Most aseptic contamination traces back to a disrupted critical zone. Everything we've discussed today, from the meticulous selection of non-shedding garments and strictly controlled changing room flows, to the rigorous plate testing during gowning qualification, and those painfully slow, deliberate movements of a trained operator, it all serves this one singular goal. It all exists to protect that clean, unidirectional first air from the human threat. So as you review your own facility's practices, ask yourself, is your team merely wearing cleanroom suits, or are they truly acting as a flawless behavioral shield for your product? Think about that. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this vital topic today, and keep learning.